none of the teachings were part of any of their culture at all. And furthermore, they didn't seem to have any kind of respect for any of these ancient teachings. They actually turned some of these gods into war gods. And it makes sense if you're during a time of war that you're going to use them in very different ways than they were before. Now, my theory behind that is that this civilization left no writings. Like, for instance, in the Great Pyramid of Giza, there are no writings anywhere, okay? A lot of these ancient sites, like, give an example too, like if you go to Pumapunku, there's no writings anywhere.
That's interesting, because you would, if it were really from, what we consider one of the ancient Egyptian kingdoms, you would expect more hieroglyphics.
Except that the hieroglyphics were maybe all come from the dynastic Egyptians.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
So maybe this civilization...
Yeah, that's just another point.
Do you know what their language was?
What was their language?
Symbolism.
Wow.
And that their literal way of passing knowledge... Why would you do that? Let me tell you why you would do that. Manly P. Hall discusses in his amazing work that the ancients' language was symbolism because that way it couldn't be misinterpreted by those who were not adepts and sages.
You need the ears to hear or the eyes to see.
Well, you're just not going to understand what you're looking at.
Yeah.
If you're not a sage that has any kind of knowledge of it, it literally won't make any sense to you.
This is true of all secret society, Freemasonry or, anything.
And so I believe that their language may have been symbolism, and these motifs represent divine knowledge that is at the very heart of two things. One, an understanding that we're part of this balance and harmony of the earth and that everything is connected. Okay? That's one. And that those things are actually maintained. And then the two is the knowledge of the divine side of ourselves and how to reach these higher states of consciousness like all the great sages have always been trying to tell us all along. And that those two are the core concepts of teaching. Some of these are even like universal laws with woven into these. And I believe that's why so many of these civilizations built out of the same stone, had the same symbols all over the earth, and just mysteriously disappeared, because I believe that civilization then traveled around the world, and I have evidence for that. I found sites, there's a site called Altan Tepe. You ready for this? 425 miles away from the other sites. Enormous distance that has the same symbols, same temple design, all of it's the same, and it shows this migratory route that they were making, and it heads right towards the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. I believe that civilization became maritime, and then influenced the pre-Greeks, influenced the Egyptians, influenced the ancient Peru and Bolivia, and maybe even other places like Cambodia and India.
Do you think this is what we call Atlantis?
I would say that it's what we're looking for the lost civilizations.
Why can't you, the more conservative thing would be to say, this is just one of these like proto-examples of the mystery rituals, and we don't know, and the mystery rituals themselves are conserved all over the world. And that's pretty fascinating, but we don't know exactly what civilization it came from.
The problem is, though, that any civilizations that are credited with this time period are considered Iron or Bronze Age, okay? Iron or Bronze Age means that you only have tools made out of iron and bronze in your capabilities. Right? Iron Age is the one that they created, the Urartians.
Yeah.
Now, Iron Age tools...
Bronze Age is like, what, 1000 BC?
That came after Iron Age.
Yeah.
Now, if you have Iron Age tools... How can you ever manipulate, first of all, move stones hundreds of miles? Okay, let's just start there.
Yeah.
If you were an Iron Age civilization, first of all, how could you move gigantic blocks? Why would you even do that? When you have local stone right in front of you that's like limestone or something softer, why on earth would you ever go to those lengths to go and get those stones? First, if you're a primitive culture, how would you even do it?
So I agree with you that the conventional narrative is off. It has to be.
It makes no sense, does it?
It makes no sense. And then drawing conclusions from this So it's like, okay, so we have like 6 or so
Turn
sites
that over
all
for a
the
minute.
world. Yeah.
Turn that, flip it around.
Yeah.
Now, no, flip the other way around.
Yep.
Now, you see the base stone? That's the like the darker, like the stone you can see in the bottom?
I do, yeah.
That's the foundation of Ionis, okay, you're looking at.
Yeah.
Now, that is built out of andesite, one of the hardest stones on Earth. Same type of stone we see all the way across the world in Tiwanaku, Pumapunku, okay?
Wow.
Now, look on top.
Yeah.
That entire mass you see on top is not dirt. It's mud brick. You can actually see the brick sticking
Wow,
out some.
that's
now,
wild.
if the Urartians were able to build out of stone, then why would they all of a sudden only use mud brick on top of it?
No, it's almost like you see this regression of humanity.
Exactly.
Like embodied in this sediment layer of like
Exactly.
actually really advanced stuff going on at the lowest levels of the sediment layer.
That's
and then
exactly
less
the
advanced
point.
stuff above it.
Okay, now that's the first thing. Now why?
Wild.
First of all, how would they be able to move these multi-ton stones
Yep.
from enormous distances? 1. 2, how could they cut them anywhere near what are like laser cuts, right?
Right.
They look machine cut.
Yeah.
I have examples from Kef Kalesi that have cuts that are so sharp you can still cut your finger on them. And you can see the same thing in Pumapunku, that are so unbelievably perfect that today we wouldn't be able to do it by hand. We would use a machine to cut those, right? We have no idea how they cut them. Secondly, some of these symbols, turn that around for a second and flip it around. Some of the symbols of the crosses actually go between blocks seamlessly. How would you do that? How would you cut these symbols in utter precision beyond comprehension and never make a mistake and put those in there like that? Now that altar in front of you is made out of golden calcite alabaster, right? And they don't even know where it came from. Okay? They seem to be going to great lengths to create these unbelievable temples aligned with sun movements for very specific energetic reasons, and I think it goes way deeper than that. You look at the designs of Ionis, the way that there's this pillar design of basalt with an andesite central Susi temple, that they all have these connections in this square around, and that they have these extended periods of stone that extend off of each corner. It's like there's some kind of an energetic, metaphysical response that we have no comprehension about at all. Like, for instance, I don't think this is anything about just tracking movements of the sun. I think the actual sun and the energy may have created something within this that human beings have no concept of yet.
Well, have you heard of certain people lying in...
Like sacred geometry, is what I'm trying to say.
You know, I get it. Theories of, resonance or fractal geometries of higher...
Right.
So, have you heard of rumors of sort of elite people, spending time in granite chambers in some of these pyramids, like modern day, like this happening now? Because I've heard of this. I've heard of, this idea of, certain people going into granite chambers and then having sort of out-of-body experiences, experiencing astral projections.
Of course.
And, coming back feeling sort of, like
I think that was one of the purposes behind them.
Yeah. And why do you think that?
I think that these were temples that were related to like ascension temples, if I want to call them that, okay?
Yeah.
Ascension temples that were designed around not only human conscious harmonics, okay, frequency and vibration, but also this fusion between, the earth, moon, the sun, and also constellations, and all of those had that concept of the law of correspondence that created a synergy, and that made perhaps humanity forgetting that when we create these beautiful spaces of energy, right? Temples of certain kinds of stone aligned in a certain kinds of way, often with gardens or flowing water or different things, that it's like a magic is unlocked, if I can describe it that way.
Yeah.
It's like some kind of a magic is unlocked and we become a conduit to be able to reach higher states. And I believe that was one of their functions for why they were created the way they were, and that we have literally forgotten all of it.
It's really fascinating that you have pink quartz in Egypt. You have granite in Egypt. You have, what do you call this? Golden...
It's golden calcite alabaster.
Calcite. In all these cases, materials that don't exist locally in the immediate surrounding environment. They're sort of going out, getting them. Then they're using seemingly techniques when it comes to building these geometric structures, creating these stone carvings that we can barely do today, or if we would need heavy machinery.
We don't even know why they did that. Now, and let me give you a reason why this has been missed. This is a big point I want to get across.
Yeah. Why is archaeology so awful?
When archaeologists came into this region, there was a man named Charles Burney, who is like you could call him the grandfather of Urartian history.
Okay.
He kind of put a lot of the Urartian history together, and then a lot of the archaeologists that came later wrote in papers that a lot of their understanding came from him, and then it kind of trickled down. It's called the Ivory Tower. It's this idea that well-established, prestigious people come before, and then others are not willing to go outside of that narrative because it's like this established doctrine, right? That gets firmly established, and then it almost gets built off each other. Now, go back to that sheet underneath, the big one. Now you see what's in his hand, and you see how in the center there's a cypress tree of life. You see that?
Yeah.
They believe, based on the Urartians being warlike, that what Haldi is passing into Sheba there, it's Tishiba and Haldi. One is a storm god, and one is a god of preservation. We see that in the what's called the Trimurti in ancient India, with Shiva, right? Vishnu, Brahma. I'm sure you've heard of that, right?
Yeah.
It's this idea of a creator, a preserver, and a destroyer. Okay? That's like very much the same concepts we see here, except for because the Urartians were warlike, archaeologists believe firmly that what they're passing in their hand is a spearhead. A spearhead. And that all those T windows up above are false windows in a castle. So much so that these sites are actually called kalesis, meaning fortresses, because the Urartians built fortresses on top of them. They are literally looking through everything and from the lens of a war culture.
Right.
Everything.
Right.
And so none of them come back to being like an ancient mystical sage teaching. They're like a war symbol. And because of that, all of these, I believe, are basically misinterpreted. Now you see that T-pillar?
So if these aren't spearheads, what are they?
They're the seeds, passing the seeds of knowledge. Basically like we see all around the world. Now I wanna show you.
So what are example of it? That's so.
Well, let me give you an example. I'm gonna pass this over to you.
That's fascinating.
And I want you to see something.
So they just assume it's a spirit because that the Urartians were a warlike culture.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now let me pass something to you that I think will help you understand this in a greater way.
That's so fascinating.
Take a look at this.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that is at Shavuz Tepe. It's made out of basalt. Now,
that's Robert Schock,
look at,
right?
That's Robert Schock right there. We were all there just recently. Now look at the T pillars on the box right, the bas relief right in front of you. No, right here on the paper.
Oh, okay.
Now look at this, the T's.
Oh, I see.
See that?
Yeah, I do.
It's the exact same thing.
Whoa. So where's this?
That's at a site right in the same region called Shavuz Tepe. That is this mysterious T-pillar, which then mimics things like Menorca, Spain, and Gobekli Tepe. And we see the same T concept in Pumapunku as well.
This is crazy, man. So that's everywhere.
It's like this ancient teaching that was being passed around, and now they believe that those are false doorways, except they have no hole in the back. They're solid. That weighs right in front of you. That weighs 7 to 10 tons. And there's no basalt local to that area.
It makes sense archaeologists would be way off on this because you have like this national pride thing, and you just want to like say that it was like this modern, like or whatever modern thing. You would never want to predate it to some antecedent global civilization.
Oh, exactly.
That like
that's where I come in.
Is the proto layer to everything. Like that would suck, right? Especially if you're like the minister of culture for like a specific region.
Yeah.
You would never want to do that.
No.
So it makes sense, like incentive wise, why you would like ignore all of this, or you would say, this is a tip of a spear when it's in fact the seeds of knowledge. Like that's really interesting.
Now,
yeah.
and now let me show you one more image really quick to compare to that. I think you're gonna really like this. Take a look at this one right here. So this is that's from the back of the Sun Gate in Tiwanaku, Bolivia.
Yep.
And it's the same concept of the 3 doorways.
Yep.
You see that?
Yeah.
Now look closely at the left and right side of those doorways. Do you see the T-pillar design? It's got the same top.
I do. Oh, I
with
see.
the-
I see. Yeah,
with
perfect.
the
yeah.
3 levels within it, just the same
Yeah.
as the T-pillar. Now,
Yeah.
now watch this. I want to show you one more.
Okay. And
we'll
where is
put-
that?
That's in Tiwanaku, Bolivia.
Bolivia. Jesus, that's so
This
interesting.
is Pumapunku. There's your T.
Do all of these have astronomical alignments
All
too?
of them.
All of them.
Now, do you see the
This
T
is
again?
crazy, man.
Do you see the T again?
I do, yeah.
That's Pumapunku in Bolivia.
And wow.
Thousands and thousands of
Okay,
miles
so
away.
now I think now I'm higher conviction that the astronomical alignments matter.
Yeah.
Because
they do.
like if they all lined up
A
at a
global
specific time.
civilization.
So okay, and then can we get a little more precise about the timing given the astronomical alignments, or these could be broad ranges?
There's
broad
different
periods of
times
time?
when they
Yeah.
can align. The one thing I can say is I'm very compelled with the research that's done with geodesy, looking at where the North Pole was
Yeah.
in relation to true north.
Yeah.
And also where, for instance, I was mentioning these Susi temples, they faced either west or east, but not anymore. They're offset. So for instance, let's say this is east, right?
Yeah.
And this is west, right? Instead of being east, they're like that.
Mm.
And instead of being west, they're like that.
Hmm.
And so it's like, well, when was the tilt different so that they faced east? And same thing as when did the temples faced true north? Not, when was the North Pole, true north, not where it is now?
Right.
So those are ways that we can start to understand these in a different way. And I'll make sure we put all those images online so people can see what we were looking at during this.
And so the Big Dipper is like 7 stars, right? Is that right? 2, 3.
I'd have to add them
I
up
think
again,
it's
right?
7, and I think Polaris is considered.
Well, it's one of the stars of the Big Dipper. Yes, it's the end of the ladle.
Yeah, and it's considered, I think, I think Ezekiel's chariots go towards that, the North Star Polaris.
yeah.
And so I do think in a lot of these Hermetic traditions, right, like you go towards, the North Star, basically.
Well, I think by doing that, again, it's that concept of geodesy. If you align yourselves to cardinal points of the Earth, both solar and magnetic, you create something. Like something special.
Does any of this relate to the modern UFO phenomena? I know it's a really weird
I don't
question.
think so. I think I'll throw out that I think a lot of UFOs are based on like secret government technology.
Yep. And then what percentage do you think any of them are not, or do you think all of them are based on secret government tech?
I will tell you that I think the concept of ancient aliens has been a bit skewed. From what I look at with these gods like Haldi, it seems more like some kind of celestial intelligence that is far more powerful than that concept, related more towards a greater concept than someone coming here in a ship. In fact, the nearest star system to us would take like 100 light years to get to. It's really, light years, if we could travel at the speed of light. It seems to me...
I think it would take 80,000 years with chemical combustion, Proxima Centauri.
It seems to me that, I probably didn't get that number quite right, but it seems to me that we're maybe misinterpreting our way of looking at the influences of these. And I'm not saying it's just man. I don't think that. I think that there's something greater and higher, and I think they're what has been confused with being angels and demons throughout history.
Do you think the angels and demons are still with us at all?
I don't think they ever leave. I think there's some kind of being bound to this reality, and that's why they seem to show that they're the guardians of balance here.
So you think they're guardians coexisting with humanity right now?
Yeah, and then we somehow have a connection to them in a way where we are almost like children of that. And that we're growing up to learn our true potential, and that they're like the teachers.
Where are the guardians?
I believe that we're now supposed to find our way back on our own.
Interesting.
And that we were given the keys.
Do you think these
there?
are... Yeah.
That's why I think all that happened, is that we were given the keys there, and that we lost them, and now it's our turn to find our way back.
Do you think the guardians are physical beings or non-physical
I think
beings?
they can be physical if they want to, but they seem like they're very, very powerful celestial beings. In Hermeticism, they call them the second mind.
Yep. I do think about like where humanity could head, and you have like two paths, right? Say we have to inflect down or up, and down is like we are extremely resource constrained. We go through some Malthusian cycle. We live in this totalitarian world. We're all microchipped.
Yeah.
We have to, barely have access to clean water. And then the other future is like a ton of resource abundance via, technology or whatever. So I think in both cases, you'd end up in some sort of simulation, because you're going to have the increase of, IT, high fidelity, like simulations a la VR or whatever, Neuralink, higher bandwidth relationship with computation, that's probably just going to increase.
But that's our path. That doesn't mean that was their path.
Well, where I think it gets interesting is even if we inflect downwards. So if you inflect downwards, like Ready Player One, like you want to opt into the simulation. If you inflect upwards, it's probably through tech that's a dual use. So it's like controlled, nuclear fusion creates clean energy for all. Uncontrolled nuclear fusion creates the hydrogen bomb, right? And so basically like a kid in his bedroom could blow up the world at some point in the future, probably. And so you'd need, if you were a guardian of that civilization, you would need people to be perfectly altruistic. And so maybe you'd give them some sort of simulation test,
right?
A la contemplation of virtue, to get outside of their simulation, or cave if you're using the Plato analogy. And so I think there's probably a version of the future in either scenario where we end up in a simulation, and then it's why aren't we already in that future? Why aren't we, maybe these are biological meat suits and we're in a cave right now, and these guys, the guardians, are literally outside us, goading us with little symbology here and there, and helping us throughout our lives. But we have to sort of seek the knowledge ourselves.
Well, there's this idea that if we can be tricked, then we're not ready. Okay, and I want to get to that idea of these building styles. Why they do all that stuff?
Yeah.
Why build all that these things like this? Why out of those types of stones? Why do that? I think it was a completely the other path that humanity can take. What I have studied is that there's only two real paths.
Yeah.
That a civilization can take.
What are they?
There's one that is a very organic, natural path, and someone might see that as being primitive, but I think that's what this other civilization took. Building out of giant stones, understanding the potential of the human energy field and the human mind to unlock abilities that we no longer remember any longer. Telekinesis, potentially levitation,
right.
Things that we don't understand, where they seem to be in harmonic resonance with the earth and the universe.
Yeah.
And I think that path is the complete opposite from what we took.
I agree.
And then there's the other path, which is like a cheating system, which is where you piggyback off of fossil fuels and then have this massive jump start by getting ahead in your civilization by kind of polluting the world and getting further and further away from spirit and source, though.
Yeah.
It's like you get there kind of quick. Look what happens in the last 500 years.
I think there's this addiction to, the Kardashev scale. So it's this idea of, I think it's 70s, Soviet astronomer or something. It's this idea of levels of energy, ability to manipulate levels of energy allow us to kind of travel at different levels, interstellar. And so, there's a single planet civilization, multi-planet civilization, multi-galactic civilization, and you get to higher levels. And I think we're sort of addicted to this idea of getting to, increased levels of
it's
kind of
a 3D
energy density.
concept, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think there's something actually very magical about human biology and the earth itself, and there's a technology involved in the construction of us and life and biological life that is, I'm sort of a biological exceptionalist. I think there's something very uniquely special about biology that we don't understand.
100%.
And there are all these examples. So the emerging, we're trying to build quantum computers right now. And, the bottleneck is keeping the chips in these extremely cool environments. It's really energy intensive. It's a material science problem as well. And, increasingly you have this field of quantum biology where we're actually finding out all sorts of quantum processes in the human body and other animal organisms, whether it's robins kind of navigating home via the magnetosphere of the Earth, and the CRY4 protein, or, enzyme creation via quantum tunneling or photosynthesis. All this stuff is kind of emerging. And then I think there's an interesting, quantum mechanics interpretation, which gets so overused, to be honest, on channels like Gaia and in the self-help community. But that actually was pretty well studied in the form of parapsychology, where, this idea that, wave function collapse is this completely random process that has nothing to do with the mind. All of the people who created this stuff, Schrodinger himself probably would have, entertain the idea that the mind was part of
Like
wave
co-creating
function
reality.
collapse.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Copenhagen school is completely consistent with
I believe
that
that.
interpretation. Yeah.
Yes.
And so, totally. So I think there is something very unique and special about consciousness that materialist reductionist
100%.
scientists. Yeah.
That's the big piece I think that's missing.
Yeah.
Is that we are far more powerful than we realize.
Oh, way more.